Hello, welcome to the conversation in New Central Television. This is the program where we bring you up to speed with all the political happenings on the African continent. I am Gbenga Aborowa.
And I am Rita Omodia. It's a bright new week, and today on the conversation, we will be looking at the economic situation in Ghana, where this has led to the sacking of the Minister of State for Finance, Adu Boahen. And as we speak, the Parliament has also set up a panel to address charges leveled against the Finance Minister, Oforiatta, as the country currently battles with rising costs of inflation.
And in Kenya, a sigh of relief as an anti-corruption court drops charges against Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. Gachagua had been in court earlier on this year on charges of corruption and embezzlement of funds, but had denied all allegations and charges brought forth against him. Interesting times in African politics.
Definitely. I mean, we're looking at a situation in Ghana. Ghana has been having series of protests as a result of the rise in inflation. And it's not just in Ghana. We've had inflation also in Nigeria, everywhere.
Different parts of the world.
Yeah, different parts of the world. But I think for Ghana, there's been a lot of call for the resignation of the president due to the way he has handled the economy, and most especially the finance minister in Ghana.
Exactly. We'll get to that in the course of the program. As we also talk about world events, the world leaders, G20, the world's 20 top industrialized nations, gathered as we speak in Bali, Indonesia, and South Africa's president, Cyril Ramaphosa, is going to be there. He feels the African Union needs a representation there because there are lots of deals that will be happening and agreements that will be signed. So it's nice to have an African presence in this sort of arrangement.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll have African countries in the G20, not just the AU, in the nearest future. Because
I mean, that argument is quite valid. I mean, how do we have discussions that affect all over the world and that the African continent is not represented? I mean, it's not like they're not going to discuss issues about Africa. So we should have representation in the G20 summit. And we've had lots of talks about why the AU should be represented among the G20.
Very important indeed.
Definitely. But right now, let's begin in Kenya, where the court has allowed prosecutors to withdraw a $60 million fraud case against the country's deputy president, Rigathi Gachagua. Anti-corruption court magistrate Victor Wakumile cited insufficient evidence in granting the request to withdraw the corruption case against the deputy president.
Gachagua was charged with corruption in July of last year with 9 other people and companies and was released after depositing cash bail equal to about $100,000. He has denied any wrongdoing. Now, joining us to discuss this and more is Daniel Juma, Omondi, Executive Director at Global Peace Foundation. He joins us from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. A warm welcome to you, Daniel, and thanks for joining us on the conversation.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now, Daniel, what were the charges leveled against Vice President Rigathi Gachagua, and on what grounds was this corruption case dropped?
Yeah, so the deputy president, when he was not yet the deputy president, he had almost 9 counts of different corruption charges, of embezzlement of almost 9 billion, shillings. So those cases were brought, they were brought to court, at the time when, the deputy president was in the camp of the then deputy president, Mr. Ruto, who at that moment was not in good books with his boss, who is the president. At that time, we had a system where, the prosecutor would drag, actually the police would drag people to court on Friday. They spend the weekend in cells and then released on, taken to court on Monday. So this case, of course, was very controversial. The deputy president, has always maintained that he was innocent, that all these cases were politically motivated cases. And he was vindicated, when after he was sworn in, one of the officers who was investigating the case, he actually, testified in court and said that he was being pressurized by the head of the DCI, Mr. Kinoti, to be able to file those charges. And in his view, there was no sufficient evidence to take this matter to court. So, and that is why after the deputy president was sworn in, as when Mr. Ruto won the elections, the DPP, had no choice but to drop those cases. If you look at the whole thing, basically it's kind of bizarre. And one of the things that we have always questioned is the independence of that office. That office has, independence of tenure, and why Kenyans have been asking, why take the cases to court in the first place if you do not have enough evidence? So rather than questioning why he's dropping the cases now, the big question is, why did he charge the deputy president and the other co-accused if he knew he did not have enough evidence? But he said that he had a gentleman's agreement with investigators, that they will be able to present the evidence. That's not how you handle, our criminal judicial system.
Yeah, Daniel, still talking about this bizarre complicity of the Deputy President Gachagua. Now, you also talked about people talking about it being politically instigated. Now, there are talks that it's been instigated by the previous administration of Uhuru Kenyatta. So, did he have any grievances with Uhuru Kenyatta? And why do you think that the DPP was pressurized to bring him to law court?
I think the problem we have in Kenya and other African countries is that individuals who occupy constitutional offices, they have been guaranteed independence. They have been guaranteed security of tenure by those offices. But unfortunately, we do not have people who have the grit, who have the intellectual honesty, who can actually have the independence of mind, to exercise that independence that they've been given. That is the problem we have, not just in this case with this particular DPP, but various officials who occupy offices, tend to pander by the whims of the ruling elite, by the executive. So they take cases, such kind of cases, that they think will make the executive happy, while they know very, very well that these cases may not stand, the test of time. So I'm not surprised by this, and I think I agree with of course, the deputy president. I support that his case should be dropped, because you do not. If there was no evidence in the first place, why we didn't have to have these cases?
Now, Daniel, the court in its submission warned that the accused persons may be rearrested in the future over the same charges should investigators find evidence. What does this even mean? And does this not mean the end of this case? Because they've dropped charges, and in the same light, you're saying, look, if there's new evidence, we might just have to call you back. So does this mean this is not the end of this particular case?
This is another bizarre, part of the whole system, because if I were the deputy president and his lawyers, I would have called for expediting of this case so that I have my day in court and be able to prove my innocence. So, and this would have been much better, because as it is
sorry
now,
to interrupt you, Daniel. Does the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya give the vice president immunity from criminal prosecution?
It's only the president who has immunity.
Okay.
From criminal prosecution. So what I was saying is that it would have been better for this case to be expedited, even a rushed hearing, and then the judge to throw the case out to declare the deputy president innocent, rather than withdrawing the case. So having withdrawn the case as it is, it still means that if another government comes to power, maybe in 5 years or 10 years' time, this case could be revived. So for me, I do not understand why if I were the deputy president, I would actually not accept the withdrawal of this case, since I know I'm innocent. I would ask the judge to declare, me innocent rather than withdrawing the case. So as it is right now, it's still kind of quite dangerous because, our politics is laden with impunity, and whoever comes to power after 5 years or 10 years may again, revive these cases. Yeah.
Yeah, now, Daniel, earlier on when I asked about the reasons why such cases can be politically motivated, now you talked about the fact that the judiciary is going by the rules of the ruling party. Now, in his ruling, the senior principal magistrate recommended the creation of a pre-trial judge with the main duty of ensuring that cases meet the evidential threshold. Now, what exactly are your thoughts on this? And do you think that the pre-trial judge really solve this evidential threshold issue?
I think the issue of bringing cases to court is the purview of the office of the public prosecutor. So I do not think it is the issue. I don't think it is the business of the court to even to judge that. I think they just need to accept the cases as brought in by the deputy prosecutor and let the judge, in his wisdom, to declare these cases. If the case don't meet the evidence, then the judiciary has to hear the case and just.
But you're wasting the time of the court by doing that if it doesn't go through a pre-trial sort of. Because you don't really trust the DPP. Sometimes they have political leanings and all of that. So how do you balance that?
I think the judges can have punity. They can come up with the punishment for cases that are brought in, that do not meet such case. For example, if the officers investigating the case, did not come up with evidence that meet the threshold, the person who is wrongfully brought to court has a right to actually go back to the judge and sue for damage. So I think we need to everything lies with the office of the prosecutor. So he needs, and he already said that he already came up with some some regulations which he did not follow before this case. So he now has regulations that will determine whether a case needs to go to court or not. So he's charged. The Constitution gives him, the authority to decide which cases go to court. He should not rely on judges, to decide for him which cases have meet the threshold or not.
So do you believe the Department of Public Prosecution needs some type of reforms of the Directorate of Criminal Investigations? Now, the department, yes, and they've been reprimanded by the court for failing to have a proper investigation and evidence on corruption charges. Now, should lawful actions be taken against the DPP, or how do you reform the Directorate of Public Prosecutions to avoid this sort of embarrassing situation and this mess that we've witnessed?
Going by this case of the deputy president, I think we need reforms in that office. And the current DPP, Mr. Nuruddin Haji, he needs to resign. That is what you do. I do not think he has the moral authority to be able to even to prosecute new cases that come in, because then how does he prove to the country that the cases that he brings in moving forward will not be encouraged by the current executive. So if you ask me, mine is to ask the executive to reform this office, and the current prosecutor, he has security tenure, but he needs to resign.
Okay.
So is the DPP under Is it an independent office or is under the Attorney General of Kenya, of the Republic of Kenya, the Minister of Justice? Or does he act independently off?
It used to be under the Attorney General's office, but now after the new constitution, this particular office is independent. He can bring in cases, he can make decisions without checking with the Attorney General or other officers. So the office has complete independence and security of tenure.
Now, looking at this independence of the DPP, there have been speculations. Now, earlier on, you talked about the ruling party having kind of bias on the DPP. Now, there have been speculation that a number of cases involving allies of the new president, William Ruto, have been withdrawn by prosecutors since Ruto was elected president. I mean, how true is this?
Yes, it is true. It is true that most of for example, the ministers who were appointed by President Ruto, some of them were facing, cases. For example, the Minister for Agriculture, he had cases in court that were hurriedly withdrawn. We also had the Minister for Public Service, who also was facing a murder charge and several other cases. So these cases were withdrawn, and it just again points to this issue that I'm talking about, that some of these people, some of these officials of government would just do this just to show the new president that he supports him, So it's very sad, because I am sure the new president, they have made it very, very clear. President Ruto has made it very, very clear that he supports the rule of law, he supports the judiciary. And there's something that even the president said, that he doesn't like those who are used to, for example, the previous administration, what they used to call praise and worship. In the previous administration, we have people, a clique in government, who would worship the president, even when uncalled for, unsolicited. So we have people, even in this administration, who are trying to pander to show this new administration that they are loyal. So in this case, you cannot blame, the president or the deputy president, but you blame the individuals who are in these offices, who are not, who do not believe that they have the independence, to be able to exercise the powers that these offices give them. So this is a problem, I think, not just in Kenya, but maybe in Africa as a whole. Right. But such kind of things will not happen in other civilized democracies.
Now, Daniel, I'm happy you mentioned this, that it's not just a Kenyan problem, it's an Africa-wide issue. When former President Barack Obama visited the continent many years ago, he did say Africa needs strong institutions and not strong leaders. So we have a situation here where you talked about praise and worship. When President Uhuru Kenyatta was in office, the judiciary was used to hunt his perceived enemies. I service praise and worship. And now you have a situation where those in the judiciary are pandering towards the current president, President Ruto, dropping charges here and there. So what are the implications for this, for the independence of Kenya's judiciary, and also the principles of separation of powers? How do we ensure that regardless of who is in power, the Kenyan judiciary will stay independent?
We have strong institutions. We have a strong constitution. The 2010 constitution is one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. All we lack in this country and in Africa are strong individuals who can occupy these strong institutions. As long as we have individuals who do not have the independence, the strength, the moral integrity, to occupy these strong offices, then we have a big problem, not just in Kenya, but in Africa. And this has a lot of bearing, to do with the separation of powers. And I'm happy the new president has emphasized, actually, during one of the reasons why the Building Bridges constitutional amendment was defeated by the courts was because that amendment was an attempt to be able to interfere with the separation of powers. Yeah. So we must, and I want to urge the judiciary, the judiciary and the legislature, to exercise the independence of these three arms of government. If we do not do this, then we are looking at a very bleak picture, not just in Kenya, but in Africa as a whole.
Now, Daniel, going in line with loyalty, you talk about judiciary now depending on the executive, and we talk about separation of powers. Let's digress a bit to the members of parliament, the members of Ruto's cabinet, that there have been reactions that it's a bit ethnically biased when it comes to his cabinet rather, especially when Uhuru Kenyatta was in power. He talked about how divisive Uhuru Kenyatta was. Now, did you see any problem with his cabinet members on picking loyalty or ethnic bias instead of professionalism?
Yes, the new cabinet had a mixture of course, loyalty, because the president, I think, went out of his way to reward those people who have been loyal to him. And that's one of the reasons why we questioned what was the need of, there was no need of appointing those particular people who had cases in court, but the president went ahead and appointed, some of these people who had cases in court, like Aisha Juma, who is the current Minister for Public Service, the Minister for Agriculture. Yet we have very many Kenyans, thousands of Kenyans who are educated and who equally qualify, even more than some of these people qualify to fill these offices. So there was a mixture of that. I understand that the president wanted to reward his loyalists, and also he is also looking at 2027. I think, as you already know, that in Kenya and in very many countries, once a new president comes to power, he starts campaigning for the next election. This is the problem we have, that if we do not have, and that's one of the reasons why at some point I called for a one-term one-term rotation of presidency, so that when a president comes to the office, he knows that he has, let's say, if it is 7 years, we just give him 7 years, like Philippines.
And he can focus on the task ahead.
And he can focus on the task. He does not need to use his powers to start campaigning for the next election. So if you look at his cabinet now, it's a mixture of loyalty, some little bit of meritocracy, but there's already complaints that even within the central Kenya that voted, for him, there's still a lot of complaints, even from his party members who are still dissatisfied, with the kind of balancing. But I understand that it's
politics.
It is his prerogative as president to appoint whoever he wants to appoint. The Constitution gives him that power. So it is that is the way it is. But again, let's wait and see how this goes.
Now, finally, before I let you go, Daniel, still talking about politicking and elections. The president is barely 100 days in office, but in early November, a member of parliament in Kenyan President William Ruto's governing coalition created a firestorm by suggesting that there was a plan to remove presidential term limits in the country. How true is this? And how did you react to it?
That was a mischievous member of parliament. I think he's a very mischievous member of the ruling party who said that he wanted to move a motion in parliament to remove the term limits. This was denied even by the UDA party because it was a very, very embarrassing suggestion. Kenya has come a long way. Kenya would never go back to the issue of term limits, because where we have come from, the first presidency, the second presidency, it was kind of presidencies mixed with the autocracy, and that's one of the reasons why we had the new constitution. So there is no way, even the current president, the reason why he won these elections is because he adhered to the constitution and he was able to demonstrate that anybody who is a hustler, anybody can win elections in Kenya, irrespective of where he comes from. So this president is a Democrat, and he has been able to demonstrate that anyone can win. So even him, I do not think he supports, such kind of mischievous characters who wanted to. I think that Mr. Yakub who is the MP for Fafi, maybe just wanted to endear himself to, or pander himself, to the new administration. Nobody knew him before then. But now, because of this kind of very, very embarrassing, mischievous suggestion, now he's very famous.
All right, Daniel, I do hope that we don't have these conversations back again, because you have laid all out and said that there is no talks about breaking constitutional term limits in Kenya. Thank you so much for joining us on the conversation, Daniel.
Thank you for having me.
And right now, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll go straight to Ghana, where the president has sacked the state of finance minister in Ghana. We'll have details of that after this break. Join us again.